Hello, NFT land. I'm Creatorius Rex. Welcome to the Niftorius Show. And today we're doing something special. We like to do these artist spotlights. And I'm going to bring my co-host, ScoJo, art director for the Niftorian Project, and so much more. How you doing today, ScoJo?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're welcome anytime. You know that. Today, I'm really happy to bring our first artist for our artist spotlight. We're going to be doing a lot of these over the next couple of months. And this is someone that you know really well, but I want you to introduce him, but I think what we should probably do is show something really quickly first, because it might set some context.
I think I know what you're going to show.
Okay, here we go. Okay, take it away, ScoJo.
Nice. That was a beautiful mint pass animation by Mac Premo. I think the people that know Mac know that on social media, here's Mac right there. He likes to be in haiku form. So I'm going to introduce him this way. I met Mac Premo while I attended RISD. His art is so rad. If you need a little bit more, I can tell you a little bit more. Mac Premo is an American stuff maker. He is exhibited all over the world: New York City, LA, DC, Miami, Belfast. He's won seven New York Emmys for his animation work. He's even done a one-man show that he wrote and starred in that I saw, and that was epic as well. He's a filmmaker, painter, animator, and general badass. Ladies and gentlemen, Mac Premo.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that intro.
You're very welcome.
Mac, you probably didn't know that Josh thought that highly of you.
No, not at all. I had zero indication of that in our entire 25-year relationship, but it's nice to hear. I wish I could respond in haiku, but that's life goals. Get in there. Well, haiku on the fly is a little harder. So thank you for starting with that.
You can do it in the comments when we post it on YouTube. How's that sound? Perfect place for haiku. Memorialize it. All right. So Mac, how'd you get started in the business? What was your goal when you're a young buck? You're 18 years old. Tell me about what you plan to do, how things evolved in the early days.
Well, I think the most frightening part about that sentence is that was 30 years ago. Growing up, I always knew I wanted to be an artist. Like that was never a question. I didn't always know exactly how, but at a very young age, I knew that like I had to make stuff or I wasn't going to be happy. I went to going into art school. I still don't know if I knew what I exactly wanted to do, but I found animation. And I found a place where I could start to form and build a voice, where it was less of an effort to try and make that voice and more of a discovery. And so that became a passion. But I was always painting and drawing and always wanted to keep painting and drawing. So it sort of all, melded together. I went to RISD with Josh. I went to the Rhode Island School of Design with Josh. And it was a tremendous experience. And one thing that I really loved about the school, which is a big criticism of a lot of schools now, is that it really didn't teach me a whole lot about how to deal with the outside world. It really let us be in a vacuum of creation and making and developing that brain set. So I was screwed when I got out and had to figure out what to do. But that's next chapter. But at 18, I was going into art school and figuring out at that point, what it meant to want to be an artist and what I was going to do with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So you have this idea, you go through RISD. What were some of the early things you did that were formative in terms of the way either your career evolved or the way you think about what you want to create?
Well, so I can jump, RISD was a phenomenal experience. And I had one particular professor, Professor Tom Mills, and I went to Mexico with him and sort of changed the way. That was one of the biggest ways that sort of my collage brain formed. I give you the sort of fast track. I go back in my life and I go like, okay, when I was 10, I loved cars. So I got like car and driver magazines and put them all over my walls. And very shortly thereafter, I really got into skateboarding. And so my entire walls were covered with skateboard images. And looking back, and then, when I was at RISD, I went to Mexico with Tom Mills. And I remember looking at Mexico City, walking around and going like, I've never seen anything like this place. It's like I'm living inside a collage. And I felt very at home with that chaos. And then I look back on the rooms that I created and my whole, the point being, like, I think that I had sort of always been a collage artist. It just took at RISD is where I discovered that. And what I love about the form of collage is it's the comfort in its chaos. That many things. I mean, look at my background is a very comforting place to me. It would drive my wife and does drive my wife insane, but it's just different ways that brains work and different ways of thinking. Things help me think. And so chaos is calming to me in that sense, ordered chaos. So that's really, I think, what I discovered at RISD. And then what, as a career trajectory, if you want me to get into like where I went after that,
Sure,
and how I sort of became here. So I met a small, very small production company at RISD, a mom and pop production company. And I moved to New York almost immediately after school and started working with them. And it was a strange sort of dichotomy of existence because I would be directing these small things for like cable television at 23 and 22 and 23 years old. And then the next day I'd get up and drive a truck as a production assistant on a bigger film shoot. So I was at the top on one set and then like sweeping on the other set. And that was a great, phenomenal education. And just learning the ropes and learning that world and the grad school of vocational activity, is really what it was. But then about 4 or 5 years into that, I got this weird feeling that I wasn't doing anything. So I quit the film world entirely and became a carpenter. It's a terrible financial move. It's a terrible idea in a lot of ways. But what I was able to do was go home every night with calluses on my hand and look at an object that I had made.
Mm-hmm.
And that felt tremendous. Years on, I got back into filmmaking. A lot of the skills that I learned through carpentry, I started to see. I look back, and the whole time I was always doing art. So even when I was a carpenter or a filmmaker, no matter what, I was filling sketchbooks, I was making collages. And then eventually, as I matured and got a little older, the three things kind of collided. And I started making film where I would build the props and use the animation skills that I'd learned and the lighting chops, and just sort of all the world sort of culminated eventually into some semblance of what I do now. But, that's evolving too. There's my life. Also, I have some kids.
The kids came along.
Yeah, they're kids. They got married. I have a wife I love. That stuff. The other stuff.
That's part of it all, right?
That's very much part of it. I'm being glib and glossing it over, but I'm super lucky. My partner, my wife Adriana, has been a creative partner and creative challenger to me my whole life, and that's been I've been lucky enough to be around people who support me but also challenge me, and that's huge. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Interesting you mentioned the carpentry being a strange career move, but I mean, it seems to me, knowing your work since then, that has paid dividends. Like the things that you're making now, like the bunt machine, like all the mechanical things that you're making, would you have been able to do that without taking that time to do that?
I don't think so. I think you're absolutely right. I think it was, it was a weird career move at the time because, like, the trajectory of, had I stayed on the film path, I would, financial security as an artist is it's a thing. It's real. I've achieved it much later in life than I would have had I not stopped to become a carpenter. But it doesn't, to your point, Josh, would I have though? Because what I do now is so dependent on that sort of soup that I went through to get here. But again, that goes back to being really, really lucky to be around people who support you and say, hey, we're going to get by. I mean, the things that matter are you can't buy anyway. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, it sounds to me like Howard Rourke from The Fountainhead.
Just to some degree, yes, I remember that. Man, I would like to think of myself as a little less rigid, or a little less. I don't know. So he was unbending in a way that because it seemed to me like he knew everything. And I think I'm unbending because I want to stay open to learning shit and figuring stuff out. Like I can't possibly go get a desk job because then I won't have this time to like spend in the studio making weird stuff that probably no one will ever see. But if I close that avenue, I know I'm screwed.
You know, it's interesting. Like you pick up on the unbending part. When I think about Howard Rourke and this conversation we're having, I think about the idea of competence, of versatility, right? And being able to know the whole process, right? Because from an architecture standpoint, he knew the welding, all the, from the design to the.
He was a rivet catcher. That's right. He was a rivet catcher before he went into architecture. Yeah.
But you're a real person. He is a fictional person. So yeah, there is that difference.
There is, but in the annals of history, who will know? Yes, that aspect of knowing all the different componentry, I think is, that's the cool part, right? Like that's the fun part of like the discovery of how that works. And I mean, there are certain things I have no interest in knowing how they work, like my taxes. I don't care. I'm not interested, like I should be, maybe I could save some money, but it's just not interesting to me. But like when like the building of things and how they're put together and how that whole process goes, like there's just avenues for discovery along the whole way that I think are fascinating. And you can learn a lot from either being part of or learning from other people who are doing them. I know when I got.
Go ahead.
Well, no, go on.
I was going to say, this is so interesting to me because we live in an era of hyper specialization, and you've created in some ways a hyper specialization that requires a broad base of different skills. And so that's, right. But you can only do that over like a lifetime of like putting all these things together and having like deep skill. And it's the recipe as opposed to the ingredient that actually makes it work.
Oh, that's a fascinating way to put it. Yeah, I appreciate that. That sounds like it sounds to me like a compliment. So I appreciate it.
You should take it that way, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that is maybe that's why that's what I can blame me not being famous on right there, is that I've taken too long. But that I think that goes back to like style. People say, oh, you have a specific style. How did you make that or whatever? And I really don't believe that you make a style. I think you don't find a style; your style finds you.
Right.
You do the work, and it happens. It becomes apparent. I think the most important part of being an artist, and the most elusive part of being an artist, is allowing your work to speak back to you. And that is not something you can just say. You can pick up a piece and go, okay, what am I seeing here? It has to happen. And I feel like style evolves in that same way too. And I think that is born of genuine curiosity. There's plenty of shit I'm not curious about. I've been accused of being a Luddite, and there are parts of me that really act like one, like taxes. The other thing printers, they're the worst machines that have ever been created, and they're designed to break, and I hate them. And I sound like Ted Kaczynski when I talk about printers. Yet on the other hand, I interface with technology constantly. Like I'll make something completely out of wood and I'll move it frame by frame in an animation style from like 1907 Chechnya, whatever, right? But then it's going to go through a computer and become an animation via the brilliant insanity of ones and zeros that enable me to edit in Premiere the same day I filmed something. And I didn't even film it because there's no film. It's on a chip. Right. Like, so I'm enamored of the digital process. I have a less understanding of its actual workings. But it's the great equalizer. It's the great enabler. It's an incredible, incredible thing. But what I love about it is that it encompasses someone like me who works in like warm tones of wood, making little stuff move. But then, like I said, it goes through the filter of a computer and becomes a thing through that magic, which is really a neat combo.
Right.
Do you think technology can be a hindrance in some places?
Yeah, absolutely. But everything can be. I think technology is something that people can become too reliant on, and not understand the actual workings of things. I think My biggest problem with technology is that we don't really have a visceral or human or temporal understanding of the way it works. And so I think it can be a very alienating force when we rely on things and then they break, which is something I constantly say, oh, the printer's broken. It's not broken. It's probably, like your extensions are weird or something, right? But I call it broken because that's my emotional reaction is this thing's broken. It's not working because we rely on them so much. It's like Jeff Goldblum's Apple ads from the late 90s. It's like, you just plug it in and then you're a computer person, and it's like, it's sort of, but then when that doesn't work, what do you do? Like, how do you lift the lid on that thing? And that separation, I think, is what's created is probably technology's biggest hindrance or failing with humanity. But we also made it. It's not like, God made the computer. We did this. So it is still an extension of human. But yeah, so yes, it can be a hindrance if you rely on it, but everything's a hindrance if you rely on it too much.
Yeah, but did that draw you to carpentry? Because
very much, totally, absolutely.
Because you understand how that all works.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And what drew me away from carpentry, just in very straight commercial terms, is that a client is still a client, and if someone's going to be a total ass to me, I'd rather add a zero. So like that's their film's more lucrative. I also frankly enjoy film more than making carpentry. I still make a bunch of stuff, but they all meld. But you're 100% right. I absolutely feel that like what drew me to carpentry was my desire to move to, I am the master of this. I built this. It's physical, isolated, understandable, a shape, a form. And there is joy in that. But like everything else, you understand that a bit, and then you're curious about other stuff,
Yeah, so Josh was working on this project with he and I were working on it together around the NFTs, and we wanted to do something that was a little bit different than what most people were doing, because you have, like, you can see over my shoulder this idea of the personal profile photo, and that's cool because that's like you can do great art there, but it's also a mechanic for creating community and affinity and all these other things. And we're like, well, we could really showcase some broader variety of art because we're an artist-centric project. And I remember him saying, hey, I have to get Mac to do one of the pieces, but he wasn't sure if you would do it. So ScoJo, tell me what you're thinking along those lines.
Well, in terms of getting the min passes, or how I got Mac to do it.
I would say maybe both, but
okay. I mean, as far as the min passes are concerned, I mean, we wanted to bring our A game, and I knew Mac would bring that, but we wanted a variety. So we wanted to showcase all different types of artists. We wanted traditional artists. We wanted digital artists. We wanted possibly animators, even generative artists who make it with code. And obviously for animation and film, Mac was the first on my mind. So it took a little bit of, I don't know, maybe a couple Facebook battles about NFTs to maybe get him engaged a little bit. And we had some pretty good conversations about that. And the funny thing is, I don't disagree with a lot of what Mac was saying, but yeah, I did want to get Mac into it. I'm not sure what did it besides our friendship. What made you want to do this?
I'm an outward skeptic, and it's fun to be curmudgeon-y. I mean I can't see it over there, but I mean I built a machine that you put your arm in, and it's got a cam arm, and it's an old drill, and it takes all the hard work of shaking your fist.
Let's see it.
It's kind of in the corner. It's strapped to the wall. It's kind of
okay. Yeah.
But like it's a fist shaking machine. Like I made a machine to shake your fist for you, so it could take the hard work out of shaking your fist. So I enjoy that. I've moved from skeptic into curmudgeonry at a pretty early age. So to some degree, it's a role. But I have big problems with art and commerce. I have big problems with the marriage of art and commerce. And they're personal problems. They're like, when I say problems, like I have sort of philosophical issues that I'm working out. And I see sort of the mirepoix of culture, of politics, economy, and then culture creating sometimes a sour soup. And so the world of NFTs are entering into the art making process as a decidedly kind of with an economic DNA. They just are. That's kind of part of the way that it's baked in, which brings up sort of philosophical problems, not insolvable, it's over, this is bad, not even judgments, but just quandaries. And so that's more about the skepticism that I'm bringing to it, is more about like examining those. I say this as someone who works as a commercial director. I say this as someone who's sold my art, like I've made fine art pieces and someone's bought them. So I interface with the economy all the time, but just, I kind of want to go into it questioning. And Josh, with you and I have been talking about either deeply meaningful or deeply meaningless crap for like 30 years. So it was this kind of, the one thing that you've always brought to projects, which I've always admired, is just a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and positivity. And so I figure, it's my job to bring the negativity, but to some degree to counter that, because I know I'm going to have an argument where but the positivity you bring to it, you don't just go, oh, well, it's okay, it's a good thing, right? You actually have a stance, a viewpoint, and a philosophy. So that's part of the reason that debate felt healthy to me, was that we were talking about, what that means. But the reality is NFTs are a new way of sharing stories. All art is storytelling, right? I'm not talking about a grand narrative arc. I'm not talking about the Fountainhead, for example. But it's the emotion. It's a visceral moment. It's an interpreted thing. We're sharing stories. We're sharing art. So that is the basis. They have a possibility of being a very good thing. Being monetized to the point of a tradable commodity that's elitist, alienating, and sort of like, weaponizes the 1%. That's a bad thing. But they're not going to be either or. They're going to be a multitude of those things. And it's happening. Like, this is the way art is being made. So when you asked me to be part of it, I was like, well, I'm not going to do it on my own, because I'm a grumpy old man who's got a terribly large selection of button-down sweaters for someone my age. But Josh is going to bring me into this fold, and I'm going to trust and go for it and see what happens. So,
well, thanks for being open for that.
Yeah,
oh, absolutely.
Well, that's like an exquisite explanation. I like that.
It's long. I talk a lot. I'm sorry.
Well, but this is a nuanced discussion, and what you'll see if you spend much time on Twitter is you'll see the pro rah folks who will just be, it's a new age, and that's about as much as they go into. They might stop and say everyone else is dumb or never going to make it, the NGMI. And then on the other side, they're like, it's just a JPEG. You guys are all fools. And they're both wrong, right? There's layers to this. There's some good and some bad that's coming. There's plenty of bad coming from this, because I see it and we talk about it on the Niftorian show from time to time. But there's so much good. And I would say that you mentioned the word elitist. And there's certainly some of that, because we're all humans. And as soon as people have something, like we even see this in like crypto Twitter and NFT Twitter, they embrace some people and they exclude others, right? It's very tribal. It's like humans just want to be a part of a group. And, part of the way they feel like part of the group is they disparage others as well as supporting their own. So we see some of that. Like, for the most part, NFT Twitter is actually very supportive, but I start seeing like these human reactions filtering in, where they're rallying the troops and being against somebody as well, because there's a certain amount of cohesion. So I see that. I definitely see the people who have just done it as a cash grab, but I also see something like 1,000x more art collectors than we saw a year ago.
Yeah.
And it's this is amazing. People who would never consider themselves art collectors now consider themselves art collectors. And they're going down this road that has been has been really exclusionary up
Yeah.
to this point. It's kind of like the way
And more so.
wine has been compared to beer, right? And it's just like, you have to know this certain type of people. You have to be with these certain type of people. You have to know these things. It's very exclusionary. It's all gallery run. As much as they tried to make it for the people, it just really wasn't for the people.
Yeah.
This is for the people. Like anybody with a MetaMask wallet can participate.
And that's fascinating. I mean, I went to a show at, it was Marlborough Gallery or something, like a fancy Chelsea gallery. And I remember it was like 2 years ago. Well, the gallery is still open. And it was really weird because there was a person with a blue coat. I'm just going to be very political here. It was a person of color with a blue coat, like a hired, like the people that museums hire constantly, right? Like you've got all these like 17th century white dudes in the wall, and you've got in New York like a legion of people of color hired to, stand. It's that caste system is undeniable when you go into the art set. And I saw that at a gallery, and I was like, wow. It's like I'm watching the sort of like the system move from museum to now gallery, whereas the galleries in New York have not recently, but years ago used to be this kind of almost egalitarian space because it was this free ability to go see a different world of different versioning art. But it's changed a lot, and a lot of it, and this is what I was talking about earlier. This is where when you're talking about the intersection sort of mirepoix, you're talking about like economy gets involved, and you got $75,000 of rent to cover for your gallery.
Right.
Your practice is going to change, and the people that you cater to, and the people that you need to cater to, because $75,000 a month is a crazy rent. It's going to change the art you show. It's going to change the people you target that art for, and it's going to change the ideas being exchanged in that conceptual marketplace. So I left the art world. I had a gallery for years, and total amicable terms. It just didn't feel like a place where I wanted to exchange my ideas, and then getting a price tag on them felt weird like that, right? In those amongst those white walls. So in that sense, this NFT world is incredibly encouraging because at least for now, and maybe it won't stay this way, but at least for now, it's democratizing the trading of and the collection of imagery. The collection of imagery is a little weird, sure, but the sense of ownership in relationship to, or at least partnership with something in relation to art, it's exciting. I mean, buying art is a really cool feeling. It feels great. It feels really cool. It feels like unlike anything else when you purchase something like that, and it can be a commodity. It can be a real visceral connection, and I think they're like what you said a minute ago. Thousands more art buyers, thousands more collectors. Actually, not art buyers, 1,000 more collectors, because the term art buyers I feel like is kind of new, and I feel like that's in the past 10, 15 years. Maybe I'm wrong. But art buyers are like, that's weird. Art buyers. What about collectors? What about people like interested in art and they want to be part of this? So that's the part that, that's part of Josh's positivity push that really caught my ear. That was thinking about like being able to get thought, creativity, and in some physical form, even though non-fungible, out there into the world is a cool, it's a cool concept. Sharing is cool.
Yeah, and I think the exciting part to me about this NFT space is like it's not just about the art and the image or the film or whatever you're making, but the utility that's attached to it. Because that's
I want to hear more about.
That's insane. Okay, yeah. So like for instance, Bored Apes, which you've heard of now, right?
Yeah.
The utility with that is it's not just a pretty JPEG that Steph Curry can have on Twitter, but now it's an international members only club that are being built in New York and LA or wherever, where you have that PFP, you're the only one that can get into that club. And I think there's a something next week that's being done with a Tribe Called Quest is going to be there. It's like all these musicians, Post Malone's going to be there. If you have a Bored Ape, you get that private party. So there's all types of things that people are doing with utility that are really, really exciting.
Okay, so let me jump in. Let me jump in on this because I think, the art in Bored Ape I think is actually very good. I like it, but I don't know that is an art project. So there's a lot of NFT activity out there that actually has some sort of imagery, which is art at some level, but it exists because of the utility, as opposed to existing because of the art. And then there's pure art out there that is just like, in many ways, like traditional art, in that it is purely for the art itself, the provenance, whatever people admire about that art. And they don't add any utility. They just happen, those two things happen to be the same, in that they're NFTs, there's ownership on the blockchain. People can not only purchase it with cryptocurrency, but they can have it in their wallet. They don't have to bring someone to their home to show them their collection, or take a photo of the wall or something like that. Their collection actually lives on their phone, right? As much as it lives anywhere. And so I think that's one of the things that I always try to think about, is like, so maybe it's all art, but if we think about it on a spectrum, some of them lean much more towards utility than art. Some of them lean much towards art than utility. The cool thing I really like about it is that artists have always been constrained by their medium, right? So their medium would allow them to do what it would allow them to do, but now they can layer things on. And as a collage maker, I would think that this would be really attractive to you, because you're talking about actually pulling all these different disciplines together in your art. And now you can layer on an experiential aspect as well, which really just blows my mind that this can be. I mean, I grew up, my mother was an art teacher for over 30 years. My aunt sort of grew up around this. My brother was an opera singer for many years. Oh, cool. And, I just looked at this and I said, geez, this is really interesting, because everything was so confined. There weren't that many opportunities for people. I think of like the people who came out in the 90s, right? Like the web, you became these digital design refugees, right? From art schools, right? It's like, oh, this is where I'm going to go. Whereas, 20 years earlier, you would have gone maybe to Madison Avenue, or, certainly there was film production. And so that's where I just said a number of things there. So I'll just end it there. I just say there's so many layers to this. And this is why I sort of go back to this nuanced conversation. There are good things and bad things about the NFT world, the way it's evolving. But the one thing that's undeniable is it is entirely different than what we saw in the past.
I think that may be part and parcel to what Josh was saying about its facet as a currency too, and it's like a redefining of that currency. It's embracing so many. It's a medium that relies on a medium, right? Like however I made my film, like I did, or whatever stuff I did, it's still now. It doesn't go on a wall. It lives in its exchange, which is weird. It's like that's fascinating, and there is a tremendous amount that can be done with that. To some degree, Josh, I think it can be used, as you were just citing, as like the Bored Ape is now it's fast tracked itself into an elitist tool. Right, because I can't go to that show, but the Bored Ape people can. But I think the entry point, like, if you keep your ear to the ground, like you can. Trying to think of the right metaphor. It's almost like when the gallery doors open, everything's $1. A month later, they're $15,000, but at its inception, they're actually attainable.
And so some of them a month later are 10 cents.
Right. And that's kind of, I guess, the participatory element of it, right? That's, I think, the GameStop revolution of art, right? Like the which is kind of
part of it. That's absolutely part of it, particularly when you've got these big collections or generative collections. Like, you don't know what you're going to get. The roulette wheel sort of, you push the button. What am I going to get? So there's this experiential aspect, which is fascinating. One other thing I'll do, and I know Josh wants to get in. One other thing that I should point out that I think is just fascinating, because I think it's lost on a lot of people. I think you probably recognize this, but when you're early in your career, some people take a chance on you. There's no reason for them. There's no like valuation reason. They just like it because they like you. They like the art. What's really cool about this is that because of the way this works, two things. One is, over time, the people who support you early in your career, as you progress and maybe you develop a good reputation and you do more, they actually get the benefit later on. of your success. And so, and who would you more want to reward? You want to reward the people who were there when you had nothing, right? And just cared about it for the, they were the people who were really passionate. And then the other thing about it, which I think is just revolutionary, is that if they do sell it later, right, you're going to feel good about it, because like it can be life transforming for some of these people because the acceleration and value that can happen.
Yeah.
And so these people early, they got this benefit. They not only got your art to be the custodian of your art for a period of time, but they get this financial benefit. And then you write into the contract that you get a royalty on that. You actually get the benefit.
See, there's only one state in the union that does it. California actually saw that, into I can't remember how many years ago, but basically they saw the case of I'm a young artist. I sell something for $5,000. Ed Ruscha sells something for $2-3 grand. Now it resells Christie's for $4 million, and that's that. It was purchased for $2 grand. That's that. California is actually trying to build, or they may have already done this, a royalties system into it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but partnership and growth, it's socialist shit, which I'm a huge fan of. People are like, "Oh, we're going to turn into Europe." I'm like, "Great, let's do it. Let's go." But this is part of the economy that's baked into NFT. So when I was saying there's philosophical problems with an economy built into it, just to your point a second ago about it's good and bad, there's awesome things about an economy being built into it, because it does reward that kind of collection mutually. It basically has taken the gallery walls, socialized the experience of art buying and art collecting to some degree, and exploded them, because you don't have to go to Chelsea to see this stuff.
And those royalties happen forever and ever. On every sale, you can get the 10% or whatever it is, the 2.5. I'm not sure what it is, but
that's wild. That's so
wild. Got a cut like that before.
I just don't understand. So let me ask you, both of you, a question, or Josh, I'd be curious what your take on this is too.
Like, how do you talking about? Who's Josh?
What's that?
Who's the Josh guy you keep talking?
Oh, sorry, ScoJo. So the him and Ari know each other, right? So how do you respond to it's just a JPEG?
Utility.
Yeah,
beyond that. I mean, just think about it. So you can take a picture, and Josh will talk about this. You can go to a gallery and take a picture of a Mona Lisa. You can get a reprint of the Mona Lisa. You can have somebody create a replica of the Mona Lisa for it. You don't own the Mona Lisa, right? Now, in this case, in the real world, somebody at some gallery has said this is the original Mona Lisa. You take their word for it, right? This is a little bit different. On the blockchain, an immutable blockchain, you can't change it, right? And it's completely transparent. Everyone can see it. People can actually come and see that is the original. This is actually better than real world authenticity. And so there are a lot of Mona Lisas out there. There are a lot of Starry Nights out there. There's only one original, right? And we all have agreed that's in one place, right? Whether it is the original or not, we hope it is, but we know that isn't always the case, because sometimes some things slip through the process. And there's a very famous guy that a lot of people know about who made a living passing off his work as somebody else's work. But in this case, what we have is we know that person owns it. Now, a really interesting thing that's happening is that some people might display that. If they display it in a way that comes across as if they're the owner of it, it's easily verified that they are not. And there's all this social stigma associated with it. It's one thing to say, I love this piece of art, and not say that it is, but there's a lot of people who sort of pass it off as themselves. And then there's all this social backlash that happens. But in essence, the fact is, NFTs are amazing because you can now own digital property. In the past, it was just a JPEG, right click. They're all the same. Now we can say this one person is actually the owner. Maybe a lot of people use it, but one person is the owner, and maybe that person has copyright. Maybe you could keep people from using it if they so chose. But that's one thing that didn't exist in the digital realm and now does.
Well, the right click is actually like an actual copy. Like you can't see the difference of the actual own JPEG. And so I wonder if a better analogy, correct me if I'm wrong, would be, let's say Mac and I go to a lot of Frank Black shows whenever we visit each other. We try to go to one. What if you take a picture of the ticket, right? You have a picture of that ticket. Does that mean you're getting into that Frank Black show? No, you don't, but you have a picture of it. So I don't know if that's a better way, because you're not getting into that community with that fake ticket. You might say you have a Frank Black ticket, but you really don't.
Yeah.
And that's the act.
Is that a better analogy? I don't know. Maybe.
That's the utility that you're talking about, Josh. That's the layer, the utility layer.
You're not getting into the community. You're not getting access to all the utility and all the.
But the utility and the authenticity, right? So you can verify that is the ticket.
Well, that authenticity, that's the sort of philosophical part that's interesting, because you like talk about the Mona Lisa and a picture of the Mona Lisa. What's the difference? And it's like experientially, I don't know. We built this thing. Like, what is the difference? Like, you're looking at a picture, whatever that picture speaks to on grand across the board human scale can be communicated story-wise just as easily with a loyal reproduction of it.
Yes.
But it's not the one. And so that there is something of knowing that is the one. That's the human trait. We have that. I mean, that's a whole nother show of like what that means and whether or not that's exclusive or whatever. But that does count for something. I think it's also interesting to think about the idea of with blockchain, with the idea of like the provenance says that you invested in this. It's kind of like mixtapes in the 80s when you were like, or like, no, like when you got a tape, you're like, I heard of this band before anybody else, kind of thing. There's a lot of that going on, I think, right? Like,
yes,
I discovered this band, like you give a tape to your friend and be like, oh yeah, I know these guys. I saw them 3 weeks ago. It's like, oh, and that kind of, that process of discovery, I think, is probably extremely exciting in the world of people who fish through NFTs and look for ones to buy. Collectors of NFTs. Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Okay. You know what we should do?
What?
We should talk about your artwork.
Yes.
That you did for our NFT project before we run out of time. So actually, I'm going to play the video again. So this should come up over this. What the heck were you thinking?
I don't know. It does have a sound quality too, which is a bit of the pun of it.
So your process. I know you sent me a couple photos early on, and tell me how you got to this one.
Well, I had okay. Truth be told, I'm looking at a wall, an 8-foot by 7-foot wall of entirely nothing but cassettes on the other side of this. Here, I'll show you like this whole world. I built a wall of cassettes for this other, for this project I was doing. So cassettes are predominant in my life right now. And I had all this equipment out. It's for a film, like a promo I did for a Radiolab series. So I'm living in cassette world, and I've that's kind of the material, the medium I've been working in recently for this thing was cassette, which is a sort of a strange medium. And I had all of these recorders down because it's a show about the advent of the cassette. And the one that I used that is the head of the owl, I didn't even mean that's a reel-to-reel thing that I've had for, I don't know, a couple decades or a year, like 15 years or something. And as I was looking through this pile of wood in the other corner of my studio over here, thinking of like building a wooded owl and thinking of like the building an animal out of the material. And frankly, I was looking to sort of contradict the NFT world with creating something out of all entirely natural materials. And what honestly, I just looked down and I saw the face of this owl in that, in the reel-to-reel. It just very much struck me. And so then I kind of went the opposite direction and kind of still as a little bit of a like loving FU to the NFT world that, this is how I I'm from the East Coast. It's how you say, I don't really understand you, so I'm gonna, say F you to you. That's just, anyway. I kind of thought it would be cool to build like a winged creature to fly, take me on this journey into this new world of understanding with like the oldest tech I had at my disposal. So I kind of made it out of the oldest possible things that have any tangential relationship. Because, the internet kind of came from cassettes. There is a direct lineage to cassettes and the internet. And so that was kind of an homage to its inception.
Wait, what is the lineage of the cassette to the internet?
You didn't play any of those video games on cassettes? You didn't ever boot up your TRS-80 with a cassette?
Yeah, sure.
That's exactly it. So you
okay.
You would get a Commodore. The Commodore. Actually, hold on.
Well,
do you have a Commodore 64, dude? Oh my God.
You take this thing right here, the Commodore cassette player.
Wow.
And if you had this interface, what the hell that is, like SCSI 0.0, and like you'd get a tape, you could get a cassette that would sound a lot like a dial-up, but gnarlier, as opposed to it was just like, it was terrible. But that would then send a program to your computer.
right.
So it was a very analog version of basically taking binary code and sharing it, but its communication device was like, as soon as we started being able to send this through phone lines as opposed to the hardware of a cassette, it was the same concept and technology that kind of versioned it came via cassette. So
Okay, that's perfect. All right, so tell us about this. So what we have is we've got the reel-to-reel, and then you've got looks like one of the original cassette tape players, and then you've got all these cut up, which I think is just brilliant.
I took the wall that I built was like 883 cassettes or 824 cassettes or something, and so I popped them in half and then cut them to make the wings, because the yellow ones seem to feel the right color palette, and then I really thought that particular cassette player on the bottom, that kind of has a nice evocative of the talons sitting on a branch kind of vibe. And so what I did is I put the whole thing together, and then I filmed it and deconstructed it. So I filmed it technically backwards. Most animation is done that way.
Right.
And then frame. It's all frame by frame animation. Moved a little, took a picture. Moved a little, took a picture, and then.
So what are these cassettes of? Like all these yellow cassettes.
Let's see. I've got most of them right here.
I thought I saw a couple of them before in there. Thanks for ruining so many cassettes for us.
Sure. Let's see.
I thought I saw a metallic one in there, maybe.
These are all bottom halves. Most of these are like Philharmonic. This is all classical music. The orange ones were all classical.
Okay.
Did you have these laying around? Did you have to acquire them?
No, I acquired them in order to build this wall.
To do the wall.
So the program. Do you know the show Radiolab? Do you know the?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So they have a lot of people listen to Radiolab on YouTube, which is weird, right? Like you listen to a podcast on YouTube, but it's like millions of viewers apparently. So they wanted to build a visual promo. And so Simon Adler, the producer, one of the producers over there, just made a show about the cassette, 5-part series about the cassette, and the history of the cassette and the way the massive impact it's had on the world that we kind of don't even think about. We think of it as an obsolete technology, but it's actually had a massive impact.
Right.
So when the film, he had a script where he talks about this. We made it in essence a trailer. And I wanted to see him I had this idea of seeing him against like a world of cassettes. So I was like, I'll just procure 824 cassettes. That should be easy, right? And it's not. easy to do that. I found out. They're
imagine.
harder to find these days than you would imagine. But Craigslist and eBay are wonderful places for weirdos like me. So
Yeah, I can see that. Well, it's really interesting too. You talked about this idea of sound, and there is sound, and hopefully people heard that when it came through when we played it. But you guys will be able to see it. Just go to niftorian.com, pull up Mac's page for the project, and you'll be able to see it and spend some more time with it. When we think of the owl, we think of sound first, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we all know that the owl's iconic, but you often do not see them.
I've seen two in my life. Yeah, you hear them.
Yeah. So I saw this is one of the things too. I don't even know what your thoughts were on this, but we basically said, hey, we just want to display lots of different types of art, but we want a common theme. So we're going to say, do it in your own style, put an owl in there, right?
Yeah.
And just see what comes back. What did you think about that? Like having that type of direction? Did you like it, or would you rather just be able to do anything?
Well, I would love to go back and say, because the owl is a mainly auditory experience, I built it out of. But the next time I describe this project, that's exactly what I'm going to say. So thank you for that.
It was there. It was it was there in your deep consciousness.
Yeah,
You're
subconscious. It was there. It's I like freedom and I like parameters, which is a bit contradictory, right? So I liked the challenge of owl, and then there are a couple little pointers. We're talking about this, the prime number thing, a little like that. That was fun to do. I would love to receive a challenge that wasn't a noun, but maybe a verb, or maybe, a concept as well, because it's just like, again, it's storytelling. Like all of this shit's storytelling. Like you say, owl, I'm coming back at you with this, but we peel back the layers and there's stories behind it. There's motivations, there's reasons we don't even know about. Right. So I enjoyed it because it allowed me to not have to write a brief and explain myself. There's a trust, and that came from ScoJo, right? That's because we've known each other forever, and he said, you can do something cool with this, and I know that I can throw something nondescript as a gauntlet and you'll still take it seriously, because making is a serious business. I think had it not come from him, I don't think I would have been as engaged, but specifically coming from him, it was,
I hope it was enjoyable.
It was super enjoyable. It was great. It was great because it's like, but a lot of that is, coming from you, because I think we've challenged ourselves like that our whole lives together, right? Like either I can go back to your thesis about the kid who walks to the museum and goes into the paintings. That was a thesis you made, the illustrated book you made 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we sat there and talked for hours about the different, aspects or whatever. And then just as, in the same night, we'd go and like play a game where we had to catch an eraser in the back of our head, like minimal challenge, massive challenges. We've always had that relationship. So that was super enjoyable. But it was also fun. It was also a nice respite for me to just go, you know what, man, I'm not going to make a film. I'm not going to make a series of collages that are, letters to my children or whatever. I'm just gonna make a fucking owl. That was cool. I loved it.
It makes me wonder, what do you do when you hit a challenge that you can't seem to get past? Like, do you have any techniques? I think a lot of artists would love to know, like, about the big artist block. Like, what do you do when you hit a problem that you can't solve? Do you talk to someone about it? Do you go on a walk? What kind of things do you do to break through?
What realm do you mean? Like, as in like a art problem or a commercial?
An art problem, like conceptual art problem. Like I want to build this, but I don't know how to start. I got a blank page.
There are only art problems. Like there's nothing else. Like right. I define art as when you come up with a solution to a problem that's a bigger pain in the ass than the problem itself, but you do it anyway. That's art. So that's kind of like, art really is just a big pain in the ass and a series of problems, but you're compelled to do it, right? So I think some of the artist block is actually some of the best times of your life, right? Because you're really in it. You know, if you're making stuff and you're confident about it and it looks great, you're banging it out, you might not be challenging yourself. But if you're in the weeds, now I'm not talking about like an illustration assignment or a film, like those are different modes of operation. This is a commerce conversation. But if you're talking about like my personal art, like those moments of not knowing are like, they're valuable. They're really valuable because you're on the verge of discovering something, or you go backwards and you go, I'll make something safe, but then you're not really making art. And so that is what it is. But those are, I don't know. I don't know. It's like when you're going through hell, keep going. I think that's the only advice I could possibly give with art. Is like, if you feel uncomfortable, you're doing something right.
Nice.
I can't think of a better way to conclude this conversation tonight. Can you, ScoJo?
I cannot.
All right. Well, that's perfect. Okay. So Mac, how should the viewers here find you? So should they check out your Instagram, your website? Where do you want to send them?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Mac Premo is pretty easy. I'm at macpremo.com is my website. It's MACPREMO, and then at Mac Premo is my Instagram. Yeah, my website's kind of a cacophony of different imagery and films and stuff I've made. And then my Instagram's a lot of pictures of my kids, like my kids. But I've given myself the framework of only posting in haiku. So I got to really care about it when I post it.
Haiku.
But those are good places to find me. And then I'm also at the Invisible Dog Art Center in Brooklyn. If you ever want to come by, bring coffee in the morning or, beer in the evening, and come on by, say hi.
I'm coming soon. Get ready.
Come on up to Brooklyn.
That sounds like a great invitation. Sounds like super. All right. So ScoJo, thanks for being here today. Mac Premo, that was amazing. Everybody check out his project with us. Is this your first NFT project?
And I just want to say, if I can conclude by saying, first of all, thank you for doing this tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you for engaging, and I hope I didn't talk on too long, but thank you for inviting me to do this, because this was uncomfortable. NFTs are weird and they kind of scare me. And so I was really, I'm excited to continue learning, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm going to stay a little curmudgeonly, but I really appreciate being invited to talk, not only talk about this, but to be part of this. And thanks for giving a shit about art. It matters.
Super. All right,
Mac.
Thank you so much, Mac.
You're the man.
Take care, folks.
Bye, everybody.